Hey, it's Corey. I'm currently working on a new horror anthology called Welcome Week with Screenager Productions, the minds behind Satan's Servant. We're making a film about the horrors of college, and we're bringing together college-age film students from all over the world to work on it. We're currently fundraising on Indiegogo and would really appreciate your support. Whether it's sharing or donating, anything helps. Thank you so much, and if you'd like to learn more, you can find us on Indiegogo at Welcome Week, or you can visit my blog, gorycorey.com. Thanks!
Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Mike.
For this episode, we're talking about Firebirds, starring Nicolas Cage, Sean Young, Brian Kettner, Burt Ryan, Mary Ellen Trainor, and Tommy Lee Jones. Directed by David Green, written by Nick Thiel, Paul F. Edwards, Step Tyner, John K. Swinson, and Dale Dye. Some of those are real military people, y'all. Released in 1990 on a $22 million budget, only grossed $14.7 million at the box office. First off, though, Mike, welcome back to Film Strip. Glad to have you here. A familiar voice if you've listened to past episodes, but for the uninitiated, do tell folks a little bit about yourself and your fine collection of podcasts out there.
Sure. I am always happy to come back. You guys know how much I love you. This is no shame to any other podcast, but this is just absolutely one of my favorite podcasts to be on. I always have a blast anytime I'm here. I am the host of a weekly action show called Action for Everyone, where I am joined by filmmaker Liam O'Donnell and film writer, historian, critic, all around brilliant guy, Vice Victus. And we kind of just talk about DTV action movies or whatever we feel like. This week we talked about Doctor Strange, so we cover the gamut, but we do really try and highlight lesser seen or lower budget action movies because that's the arena that Liam works in. I do want to shout out, they just announced today his new movie Skyline 4 has been picked up and is at the Cannes market. So
nice.
So we're all very excited about that. Of course, you can also go back into the archives and hear me on Adkins, my old show Adkins Undisputed, where I was going through the career of Scott Adkins. And if you go way back into archives on the Dana Buckler Show, you can hear me on the 20th Century Movie Club and a couple of other episodes with Dana there. So
absolutely, Mike. Glad to have you back here. And this is a follow-up to an aside from our recent Double Jeopardy episode where we to tell the story, you're an attorney in real life, and Lindsay and I drug you through that horrible experience to explain to us how completely wrong they were about Double Jeopardy. And you should go listen to that show, folks, not to just pimp our own show, but go to the part right in the middle where Mike goes at about a 20-minute roll of how wrong all of that is. And it's great. But in that discussion, you and I learned something, Mike, that we both shared a love for this movie and that Lindsay had never seen it. And so there also were other moons moving about. Nicolas Cage is back in the box office world with, the massive talent and other things. Apparently paid off all of his tax debt, so good for him. And Top Gun is back in theaters soon, if not the cultural zeitgeist, if it will. And so what's more on brand for this show than to combine the two of these things and to make somebody watch something they've never seen before? So Lindsay, I have to get you to spoil, though, ahead of time. Without giving too many thoughts about the movie, you had a hilarious text chain with me about your Brian watching this with you, followed up with a picture that was a bit contrary to what you were saying he was saying.
I think the exact quote was, "Do you guys ever pick good movies?" He's a good sport. He watches almost all of them with me. But then you're right. Yes. Shortly after, I caught a picture of him and my cat glued to the TV. It was one of the better scenes, but it was still not a great. It was interesting. We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. But, I wanted to get that out of the way because it is hilarious. We'll kind of swing back to you in a bit, Lindsay. But, Mike, you are the king of Firebirds fandom, so please do tell your history with this.
So, I mean, I go back to 1990 with this. I didn't see it in the theater, but I got it as soon as it was available on video because I remembered seeing the trailers. In 1990, I would have been 13, 14, somewhere. I don't remember exactly when it came out in 90, but I was 13 or 14. And I was already a big Nicolas Cage fan at that point. I had already seen Valley Girl. I had already seen Raising Arizona. And so I was on board the Cage train already. And so the idea of Cage in an action movie that involves helicopters and basically looks like Top Gun, but with helicopters was just too much for me to resist. And then when I rented it and watched it and got what for me was the performance that turned me into a lifelong Nicolas Cage fan, coupled with Tommy Lee Jones doing what Tommy Lee Jones does, I was all in, and I have been a diehard defender of this movie for years. I am, as we'll talk about, I am fully aware of the kind of movie I'm defending here. This isn't like when I came on to talk Rapid Fire and I argued that was an actual masterpiece of action cinema.
But it actually is, though.
Yes, it actually is. But this one for me is more just about, I don't want to call it nostalgia because it's not, because I've never not loved this movie. But it is, I think, such a unique time capsule of filmmaking in 1990 and Nicolas Cage in 1990 and Tommy Lee Jones in 1990 that I love the hell out of this thing. So I am going to be the one that is completely off the map on this one, I think, for this episode.
So for me with this one, we're around the same age, Mike. I rented this one because it had things in it that I was attracted to as a teenage boy. We had attack helicopter things. I had a friend that actually had the Gunship 2000 Microprose game that gets featured as the simulator in this thing. So I had played that. I didn't own it, but back in those days, you'd go to a friend's house and play computer games together, and which meant each taking a turn on it because you couldn't play against each other. But I'd played that. I thought that was cool. I knew what Apache helicopters were. I thought that was awesome. And so you had that. I knew who Nicolas Cage was because I too had seen Raising Arizona. I don't think I'd seen Valley Girl at that point, but I knew who he was and had seen some other stuff with him. But the two things that drew me in, besides the helicopters and the explosions and all that kind of stuff, were I saw No Way Out way too young as a kid. So I had been in love with Sean Young for a long time. And so I was like, ooh, Sean Young. Oh, and then Tommy Lee Jones is my earliest movie memory. It really is. The very first movie I know I ever saw, or at least can remember seeing and remember anything about it, was my parents taking us to a drive-in movie theater, and in the back of their Ford LTD station wagon, laying all the seats down so we could lay down with Hardee's. I remember that very specifically, watching Coal Miner's Daughter. And if you've never seen Tommy Lee Jones chew the scenery up in Coal Miner's Daughter, I implore you to go watch that, because you will see every performance the man's just about given his entire career. It's all right there. So I was down for all of this, and I rented it and watched it. And I know I'd caught it on cable here and there through the years, but it's been a long time since I watched this for anything. And in the deep dive of this, one of the funny things I found is there's a YouTube channel with a former pilot who brings on other pilots to kind of go through different scenes in movies and talk about what's real, what's not. And, they kind of have fun with it. They don't nitpick it to death, but he brought in this Apache pilot, and the guy said, everybody says this is the Army's version of Top Gun, but it's more like the Army's version of Iron Eagle 3. And that resonated with me because I've seen all the Iron Eagle movies, and particularly Iron Eagle 3 holds a special place. But I'm with you, Mike. I'm kind of in team fan of this because the things I remember about it were Sean Young, and I didn't remember the incredible amount of harassment she sustains. We'll get into that, but I just remember Nicolas Cage being absolutely cagiest. It's all that stuff that he does that makes him who he is and is a part of massive talent and all the stuff that he's done for years. And Tommy Lee Jones just being this, like, he's 44 when he made this movie, and he might as well have been 78. I mean, he's just this curmudgeon, and we talked about it on Double Jeopardy, but I had so much fun with that. So it was fun to come back and kind of do this, and it's always fun to introduce somebody to this that's never seen any of it. So Lindsey, sort of where are you on Nick Cage, Sean Young, late 80s, early 90s action movies, and maybe even like Top Gun culture and everything that spewed into the world.
Wow. There's this is we're going to be at two very different ends of the spectrum, you guys. but no, so my dad, I come from a military family, so I grew up watching all kinds of movies like this. Top Gun, G.I. Jane, later in the 90s, A Few Good Men, like all of the classics and all of the newer ones. Every time a new military type of movie comes out, the first thing my dad asks is, have you seen this movie? You've got to see this movie. It's such a great movie. So I was reading the description of this one before we ever went down the road of watching it, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a great movie. This is right up our alley. It's got these great actors in it. Like, this is like exactly the kind of thing that Brian would like to, and he's such a big Top Gun fan, and I like Top Gun, so this is going to be a fun movie, and it's only an hour and a half bonus. So I was not prepared for what I saw. One of my first thoughts too, as I was reading the synopsis before we actually started playing the movie, was, how in the world did I miss seeing this movie? I'm the kid that grew up watching Major Dad with my dad. Like, right? How did this movie miss me? And I guess it just did, but I guess I can't say I haven't seen it now. So
right. I do want to ask, and I'm not to put you on the spot, Mike, but are you responsible for the Wikipedia plot summary for this movie? Because it's not. I mean, it is the movie, but it's also like a very different representation of what actually gets executed on the screen.
I am not. That is not me, and I've never even looked at it. So now I've got to like look it up and see what it actually says. Because no, I am unfamiliar with this.
It reads like a Tom Clancy novel.
Yeah, no. If it was me, it would have just been me repeating "I am the greatest" over and over as the entire plot summary.
Indeed, you blew it. So we'll get into Cage and his lines here, but
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing though. And this movie, it did come out in 1990. It was obviously made in 1989. And I always like to say, like, when you talk about decades, you have to remember that the old decade really laps over for a few years. Ron and I talked about this on the original Friday the 13th review, that even though that movie came out in 1980, it's still very much the 70s till like 1984, in the 80s. Yeah. And the 90s didn't really kick in until about 93, and so we're still hanging on the 80s.
Dana and I used to always talk about that too, that it would take about 2 to 3 years before you sort of got a sense of what a new actual decade kind of feels like. And so, yeah, I agree with you completely. This is very much a late 80s movie, not so much a 90s movie.
Yeah, no, and you don't want to look at it that way. We'll get into like all the visual effects and how that was done and all that kind of stuff as we go through this. But I'm very curious to continue this conversation as we go forward. So, Lindsey, I'm gonna throw it to you. Please do give us the plot summary for Firebirds, if you will.
I'll do my best, Jay. Let's see. So, when the DEA and the U.S. Army form a joint task force to take down drug cartels in South America, they call in the best attack helicopter instructor in the armed forces. 40-year-old, but acts and looks more like he's 60. Sorry, Tommy Lee Jones. Chief Warrant Officer Brad Little, who is there to make sure the best of the best are up to the task. The top pilot is hotshot Jake Preston, who lost several of his fellow chopper forces in a previous engagement to the hands of the cartel's helicopter gun for hire, the evil Eric Stoller. So Preston has skills, mad skills, along with his gunner/co-pilot Breaker, but his eye dominance issue threatens to derail his flying career. So there's also the complicated relationship he's trying to rekindle with scout pilot Billy Guthrie. Guthrie, Little, and Breaker help Jake overcome his issues, and the force springs into action as the cartels are moving fast. Little joins in the flight, but is shot down by Stoller. Billy lands to rescue him and even shoots down a fighter jet from the ground. Yeah, that happened. Jake and Breaker engage in an air-to-air battle where Jake hits the brakes, lets Stoller fly by, and Jake blows him out of the sky. Without the air support, the ground forces move in and arrest all the cartel members. Little is taken off in a medical chopper while Billy and Jake stage a cute argument over who is flying home as Phil Collins sings us home.
There may be nothing more 1990 about this movie than fucking Phil Collins, the last song that he's featured in the middle of it too, as part of the love theme. I love Phil Collins. Ironically, I am a fan of Phil Collins. I like his pop music. I'm a sucker for a good pop tune, and he certainly had a string of them. But it also puts a sheen on this that is really odd from what we're trying to propose as the central theme of this movie, of the war on drugs as a literal war. Like that is something so 80s and 90s that, man, it just takes me back.
I was going to say, is it any weirder than fucking Berlin showing up in the middle of Top Gun?
No,
like, it's not really any weirder than that, right?
No, sir. No, not at all. And I think that's what gets me about this, is that most of this script, or at least the premise of it, written by like retired Marine Corps and Army people, like helicopter forces, all this. And they came up with the idea of, if you were ever going to really take on the cartel, it would have to be a task force between a federal agency who basically paid for the services of the U.S. military. Because lest we forget, at this point, we're not, staging wars around the world at this time in life. So we have the time, the bullets, and the machismo to pull this off. I mean, this is the time of Ronnie Reagan, and really on the tail end of his I guess this is Bush Senior's term. But we're in that mode and that era of stuff. And I gotta ask y'all, does anybody else feel like you miss like the first season or first part of Firebirds when Jake is giving us this flashback about Stoller gunning down his whole crew? I'm like, is there something missing on when I rented this from the library, so I'm like, did the disc skip? Like, I feel like I missed a season of Firebird somewhere along the way.
See, I'm going to say I appreciate that efficiency in storytelling. I mean, this is an 85-minute movie with credits. So we're really talking about maybe like a 79-minute movie. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate, as somebody who has sat through, say, a certain comic book movie. You know what? I got to stop bagging on that movie. But anyway, I appreciate the efficiency in storytelling, because I don't need to know his partners that get shot down. I don't give a shit who they are. What I need to know is that Preston got out because he's an amazing pilot, and now he's got a chip on his shoulder and he wants to take Stoller out. That's it. I'm good. I'm set up. Let me go. Right. Let's get off to the races here. I
mean, it is incredibly efficient how they set up everything you need to know, including the evil helicopter pilot of the cartel, which we're going to get to him in a little bit. But I'll give him the credit. But what I'm amazed at is David Green is directing Nicolas Cage, presumably, in this scene, and Nicolas Cage is giving this really thoughtful performance. Like, he's trying to put all this like weight and emotional gravitas in his lines, and I'm like, bro, that is not your character. Like, the rest of the movie, he's like loked out on an 8-ball. So I don't know what's going on.
No, you're giving Nicolas Cage far too much credit, Jay. I don't think he used more than 3 tones the entire movie. He is the most monotone. This is the most monotone performance. Even for Nicolas Cage, it was monotone.
I mean, granted, his debriefing tone and his "let me sexually harass the helicopter pilot" tone are basically the same. Mm-hmm. They are this sort of deadpan, cut off my sentences thing that he's doing. I don't know. I thought it was interesting the way that they set that up. And if you look around the room too, in the military debrief room, there's a lot of character actors that wind up playing these kinds of parts throughout other movies, particularly in the 80s and 90s. And I'm just sitting there going like, man, the only thing they didn't have was Mitchell Ryan in there. And that would have been perfect.
The big one you have to shout out is Dale Dye, who also wrote the movie, but then is in there and has made an entire career being both a military advisor for movies and playing military people in movies. Guess he's the one who asked Cage, do you believe the Apache can do? It is my opinion that it is the only helicopter that can, sir.
I did get a kick out of the fact that he's like, have you been checked out on that? Yeah, well, I've done the academics, but I haven't flown it yet. And like, I have a former coworker who once told me, he's like, there is no academics. You get in the thing and you fly it. Like, that's not how that works. That's not it at all. But I get that what they're trying to tell us is that he studied up on it. And, I also have to remember who this movie is written for. It was written for 13-year-old Mike and Jay. Like, it really was. And so it's hitting us on like, I got to fire up the 5 1/4 inch floppy disk of Gunship 2000 because 2000 so far away that year will never get here. And, watch it boot up and
we'll
while I'm
have
playing
flying cars by then.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I mean, but I realize that's who this is written for. But all the shorthand stuff that they do, it actually does kind of work. I mean, it's, if you take it for what it is. And what I realized that this movie does owe itself a lot to things. And I think the Top Gun thing is kind of the lazy way to sort of throw this in because there is so much, air stuff. And there's a reason that sheen feels like it belongs here in the cinematography in a bit. But this movie has a lot more to like Iron Eagle in its blood than it does Top Gun in my mind, Mike. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely a much more DTV action kind of movie. Like, back then it wasn't DTV. These actually got theatrical releases. But yeah, it definitely has more Iron Eagle in terms of it's not this glossy movie directed by Tony Scott. It's a much lower budget version of that. And I'm with you. I kind of think the Top Gun comparison is a little bit lazy because you know what else is a Top Gun knockoff? Backdraft. Like, that's the thing that people forget about is that, we think just because it's helicopters, it's a Top Gun knockoff, but there were 1,000 Top Gun knockoffs that weren't necessarily just about military pilots. Like, Top Gun sort of set this bar for this hotshot rookie who has to learn all this stuff. And so I've never really taken the whole, it's a Top Gun knockoff thing as much of a criticism for this movie because it was a movie that came out in the 10 years after Top Gun. I can give you 1,000 more, not just the Iron Eagle movies, but I mean, there's so many. I mean, hell, in a lot of ways, even though it came out before, you could argue that like sort of some of the Police Academy movies are even like Top Gun knockoffs. You know what I'm saying? Yep. Like, yeah.
I guess they start influencing each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Because Police Academy came out in 1984. So, but I mean, basically, it's sort of like any time because it's not like Top Gun was this original groundbreaking script, like Top Gun's good because Tony Scott, not because of anything on the page.
Well, it's good because I would argue Tony Scott, the flying sequences Richard T. Stevens put together because he's the guy who did them for this. That's why there's the comparisons and that soundtrack
and the volleyball scene.
Yeah, built around that, right? So, because it's hitting all of its demographic at that point, because that movie's definitely made for a different group. So, Tony Scott himself, like, I forget which of the actors like talked about their memories of Tony Scott and they're on Top Gun and saying, like, I was asking Tony for direction. He's like, I don't know, mate. It's just rock and roll. He just walked by me and I was like, that's so Tony. But I love Tony Scott and I love that. And I love that anything that wants to try to live into that world, I'm okay with that. We do want to talk about. I do want to talk about those flying sequences because they shot a lot of this out in like Tucson, Arizona, and stuff, which is not exactly where you live, Mike, but it's in the same vicinity area. So it's some of that beautiful painted desert out there, and what they do with these helicopters is pretty awesome. I miss the days when we would blow enough money on real helicopters and get the National Guard to come fly for us. Now it's all fucking CGI and models.
Well, it's not just the helicopters too. It's because if you're CGIing a helicopter, you're also very likely not going to go out on location. And yeah, I actually had to look it up to see, because I was like, I've never looked. Was this actually filmed in Utah? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, Tucson. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But yeah, you're not out on location. I mean, there's a real tactile feel to where this is filmed. And like you said, that painted desert. Plus then, yeah, you've got real helicopters flying low to the ground, doing stuff that, looks impressive. I almost, in a lot of ways, because helicopters are easier to maneuver, think that some of the flight scenes in this are actually better than some of the ones in Top Gun, just because of the logistical difficulties of shooting actual fighter planes. I mean, there's a reason we do CGI fighter planes now, but because helicopters move slow enough, you can get some really good shots. There's some really terrific stuff in the flight scenes in this movie.
But all of that, again, appeals to 13-year-old Jay and Mike. What I want to know is what Lindsey is seeing when we're sitting here geeking out over the helicopter flying stuff.
That was probably the best parts of the movie, mainly because there was no talking.
So you seem to not dig the dialogue thing.
Hey,
So
you know what? Actually,
Mm-hmm.
no, I will say, I think the scripting and the dialogue is fine. It was the execution of it that I have issues with. I have many, many issues with the acting in this movie, which is unfortunate because I was like, Tommy Lee Jones. Like, at least I can bank on him being Tommy Lee Jones.
I mean, he was Tommy Lee Jones.
How is he any different in this than anything else?
He was a dollar store version of Tommy Lee Jones.
Well, another callback to our Double Jeopardy episode.
Yep.
Everyone. So, I do love his whole "I'm too over this shit, but I still want to do it, damn it" thing that he's got going on.
Well, the other thing too is his character in the movie was 40, and you said that he was 44 when he filmed it. He looks so much older, and maybe it's just because he doesn't look any different now than he did then, and now he looks.
It's the face. It's
70s,
it's the sun pockmarked face. It's always aged him. Yeah.
I mean, I'm here for it. I actually, you know what? I thought it was adorable, like him and his kids in the grocery store scene. I was down for that. That was cute. But I thought the scripting was fine. The fight scenes, what do you want to call it? The simulation, like video gaming thing. That was one of the more entertaining parts.
How can you not be entertained with Nicolas Cage? Just I am the greatest, and like he's almost singing it at one point, and I'm like, I got confused though because I was like, I thought you were the pilot and the guy in the front was shooting like Last Starfighter, but now you're shooting and he's like, what's happening here? I don't understand the Apache avionics enough to know. And I don't think they want us to think about that, but it did run through my head because again, I'm a movie geek and I'm going, wait a minute. What's role here in this situation?
I can suspend my disbelief long enough for that, you know. And we live pretty close to the Air and Space Museum. There's two. We live close to the Udvar-Hazy one, which is the one outside of DC. And they have one of those, or they used to, one of those simulators in it. Oh, wow. And my younger brother and I did it once. We accidentally got it into a spin and couldn't get it out of a spin. So then we were just stuck in the simulator spinning until it stopped.
That sounds awesome.
It was terrible. But we made it through. But maybe that's why I liked it so much, is because I'd been in one. But I mean, that was probably one of the more entertaining points for me, for sure.
I mean, again, for me, that was reliving watching, having played that game enough that I was like, oh, yeah, they're just using the Microprose game as the overlay for the simulator. Because I've seen military simulators; they're not that fancy, or at least they weren't in that time. And I don't know. I thought it was funny though because it gives us a whole lot about. Like, you don't need to know anything about Breaker other than he's just good looking enough that he's probably not going to die. But if he does, you'll feel bad about it. But you feel like he's the other friend here in this situation.
I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Do you like video games, Breaker? Good, because I have a pocket full of quarters. I can't believe you don't like the delivery in this movie, Lindsey.
I love it.
This is so amazing to me.
Yeah.
Like,
you know what? Okay, well, when you say it like that, it's fine. There are some good, like, one-liners taken out of context. I agree. There are some fantastic one-liners in this, which, as a 13-year-old kid, not even just a boy, I can totally see, like, running around just quoting this movie for years, you know? Like, do you like video games? I've got a pocket full of quarters. At the actual arcade, I could totally see that happening.
But arcade. Talk about, we know I've all just dated ourselves very severely with that one. Those don't exist anymore, except for adults.
Arcades still exist. What?
Not for the kids, the adults. But I do think that's funny because it did remind me of like Afterburner. I think was like the hardest flying game I knew as a kid because you could sit down in the actual cockpit and all that cool shit and play that.
There was another funny one where I think it's one of the first times Nick Cage is in the Apache, maybe. I don't want to say the wrong helicopter name. And he blows a bubble with his gum.
Yeah.
And then it pops and he just goes, darn. But it was, I mean, in response to what I assume Tommy Lee Jones is saying. But
I think it was something like I love the interplay though with Tommy Lee Jones and whoever his NCO is there or whatever that he keeps giving orders to, like rank it up to Zulu Henry or what the hell ever, and the guy keeps going like, "Sir, it's not rated for that." Which that's that guy's job is to do that. But I love how he mutes it like, "If you don't start doing what I tell you, I'm going to make you shovel dog shit to Hong Kong," or whatever the hell it is he says. And I'm like, man, it's just like I'm convinced Tommy Lee Jones, if he had lines, he didn't know what any of them were. He was just like, yeah, I got it. And he just rolled with it. And I actually love that, though. I thought that kind of folksy thing that he's doing is funny. It makes this funny. What would have made this intolerable if this movie was 2 hours long and we would have had all this shit? Because then I'd be like, where are we going?
With you there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that it was an hour and a half was a boon. And, you know, I'm with Mike. I do appreciate an efficient movie, but
But I love the simulator thing though, because they're trying to push these guys obviously beyond their limits, and this is where we realize Jake's got a problem, right? And they make him put I don't totally understand all of it, but basically like he's got to be able to process what's in the reticle on his right eye and what he's seeing in his screen on his left eye, and he's got to fly the helicopter and not crash it at the same time, which that sounds like a horrendous day at work. Like, I'm not gonna lie. So that I'm with him, but I didn't realize for years, no lie, I thought this was like they made this shit up for this movie because I had never heard of this before until I was clued in to some real stuff. So, Linz, I will give you the floor with that.
Yeah, that was a I don't know. That was a moment for me when he was like, or when he finds out, I think Billy tells him, "Oh, you're right-handed, but you're left eye dominant." And I went, "Oh, I'm right-handed and left eye dominant. That's so cool." And that is a real thing. Mine can't really be fixed by means of how they fixed his, and I don't know if that part's actually possible. We're going to talk about that in a minute. That was adorable. No, I can't actually close my left eye. So I shoot, I play pool, I do archery, I play darts, all of that left-handed. So I've taught myself how to use my left hand instead of teaching myself how to use my right eye.
Very interesting. I did not know this was a real thing. Linz revealed
Which
this.
would not work if I was a pilot, but it does work just as, a normal civilian human being.
And see, I had always misremembered this, though. And I think this may be some of the brilliance that you talk about. It's kind of snuck into this movie, Mike, is that I had thought like it affected his shooting. And I'm like, it's a fucking laser guided missile system. Like, who gives a damn what eye works, like just point and do it. But it actually, like the way that they talk about all the information he's having to process, I'm like, oh, I misremembered that. This is actually like they give a real reason for this. They don't like spend a lot of time on it, but I appreciated that they had a reason for it.
So contribution to this, it is actually far more common than you think in women. I don't remember the exact number, but it's about like 30% of women are cross-eye dominant. My ex was, and my current wife is. Well, my current wife is ambidextrous. So she's like full ambidextrous. Like Kelsey can do anything with both hands. It's very infuriating because I'm so right side dominant that if you actually cut off my left arm, the only reason I would know it is I'm out of balance. But other than that, like, I would not miss my left arm at all. I would just, in fact, I would be like, oh, great, I just lost 20 pounds. Awesome. But it is actually very rare in men. And so, but it does exist in men, but it is very rare. So yeah, it is, cross-eye dominance is a thing. And that's one of those, Jay, where I think, you mentioned all the military people writing this. I think that's where some of the, like, I hate to use this word. I don't want to use the word accuracy because this movie's not accurate.
Inside baseball is more what I would refer to that as.
And authenticity is the word that I kind of like to use here, where you do have stuff that they're very clearly bringing, like clearly somebody on this script has dealt with a pilot that has an eye dominance issue before. Because why the fuck would you make that up? If you're just like a normal screenwriter, you're literally not even going to think about that, right? Somebody somewhere who worked on this script, worked on an Apache, knows that eye dominance is a problem. And then they probably handed it to another screenwriter and they're like, in fact, frankly, in reality, most people with eye dominance problems wash out of the Apache program. And then another actual like screenwriter, not a military guy, goes, oh, let's just tape red panties to his head and cure it.
Right? Okay, so I got questions about this because here's how they fix this. They rig up a periscope basically that keeps his right eye open so he can drive this blacked out Jeep Hummer around the base, and they put underwear over the left side of the face because, as we've said, the Sean Young character helps him figure out that he's got this problem, but Breaker and Little are the ones that work him through it, and it's Little and his wife have this conversation about, well, you had the same problem and you fixed it, so why don't you do the same thing? I had thought forever, like, Sean Young was throwing her underwear on his face because they had this whole underwear meet cute laundromat harassment scene earlier. Is that Little's wife's underwear on his face? Because that's a whole other level of weird shit that I didn't think we were getting into today, but here we are.
They're on a base jam, and both Jake and Breaker are attractive men. I'm not sure it was hard for them to fight. I'm sure if Little went, God damn it, you got to get me some red underwear. They probably didn't have to go very far to track that down.
But the fact that they don't bother to explain and that it's right on the cusp of that convo with Mary the trainer and Tommy Lee Jones, I'm like, did she just go like, here, these are clean? And he's like, fine.
Jay, I got to be honest with you. I have seen this movie like 25 times. And that thought never crossed my mind.
It only hit me this time because of that scene. So.
I think you assuming that they're clean is also potentially a stretch.
That is also fair if we go with the one of Breaker and Jake's putting themselves through nursing school friends. Let's just put it like that. So if maybe that's what's going on. But that is a hilarious let's fix it kind of thing. And this is where I get my Iron Eagle thing, because the idea that Doug Masters can't shoot in an F-16 laser guided without the music, I'm like, oh, so that's what this is. Like we had to come up with some reason to fix this. And I have no doubt that there's a training program to like teach somebody how to use their dominant eye. Lindsey, you talked about that's something you can learn how to do if you want, but I don't know that it goes down like this. But it is hilarious, and I gotta say the scene is really funny, mostly because of all the ADR work. Tommy Lee Jones is putting in some good comedy here, y'all. Like there's some hilarity in what are you saying? I would very much like not to eat that dirt.
And I also like when Nick goes, lost a little bit of control there, but now everything's cool. Like come on, this scene is hilarious to me.
It is so cheesy, but it's like Grease too cheesy, and that's what makes it great.
I would love to see. There has to be a commentary of this movie that exists.
Oh, that
like
would be...
a director commentary. That's what I want to know. I want to know what direction they were given.
What David Green was telling him to do. I don't know. Yeah. I'm curious if that exists. All I saw were like bare bones DVDs before I realized the library had it and I could just digitally download it.
So I've owned this movie on 4 different forms of media: VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, and Blu-ray, and none of them have any kind of commentaries because nobody cares. Nobody but me cares about Firebirds enough to put those special features in.
You had me with VHS, DVD, Blu-ray. You own the fucking Laserdisc in this, man?
Oh yeah,
dude, that is fandom beyond.
I'm glad we didn't gloss that part over.
I know I wasn't gonna let that go by. I'm like, that's impressive, dude. Like, wow. So I didn't know they made Laserdisc of that, but okay. So I should say I did look up, like rental wise, this movie made a ton of dough. Like it mostly because it looks like Mike, you quadruple dipped on it, but I mean, really, like this, it made its money back in the home market. So even though the box office didn't flash for it, it wasn't like it was a complete, trash out.
I mean, it looks cool. You know, it looks really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's well shot. It's well lit. It's like we talked about, it's got that tactile feel that it really is frustrating when you watch a movie like this, which, like, again, I know I'm the world's biggest fan of this movie. There's very few criticisms that could be levied against it that I wouldn't agree with. I do dispute Lindsey's assertion that the acting in this is not tremendous, but other than that, there's very few criticisms that you could levy against it. But it is frustrating to watch this movie, this quote unquote garbage movie, and see that it looks so much better than 90% of the movies that you see coming out today.
Yes.
I get when people get like cranky old people yell at Cloud on the internet about how modern movies look, because this is a nothing burger of a movie, right? Yeah. And it still looks better than, say, I don't want to say Doctor Strange because that's a Sam Raimi movie, but whatever, the Eternals. Like, I will take Firebirds over the Eternals any day of the week because this has depth. It looks good. It's got a tactile feel. And that is one of the reasons I think I gravitate towards some of these old movies like this, is just because it's not necessarily nostalgia. It's nostalgia for a time when movies looked like movies.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will 100% agree with you there. There's something to an actual set and actual pyrotechnics and actual helicopters and all of that make a movie in that time frame something just so much more special than kind of they feel now with all the CGI.
Well, there's something about the sheen of modern filmmaking that it just looks too clean. Mm-hmm. Or when they try to make it look dirty, you can tell it's fake. It's like I'm in the metaverse. Like, oh, this is really neat, but it's not real.
You can't search for movie errors. Did you guys ever do that? My brother and I used to obsess over that. We loved watching movies and trying to find all the little movie errors and like incontinuities that
the goofs section of IMDb was like what I read when I was supposed to be studying in college. I mean, come on. That's half of what the internet was invented for. It was all the times the boom mic hit somebody in the head and Dolomite or what the hell ever. So I mean, really, that's the fun part of this stuff. I do got to ask a question though, because I think I may be on Lindsey's side on this one here, and I don't mean to speak ill of anyone who's a professional actor, but Sean Young sucks in this movie. And I just blame it on the fact that she didn't get Batman and she was mad about it. She's really bad. And I like her and stuff. She's good in No Way Out. She's awesome in Blade Runner. She's bad in this, dude. And they don't give her a lot to do except to get harassed by Nick Cage. I get that. But I feel bad for her because she just seems bored out of her skull the whole time. She's the one thing that takes me out of it.
She's definitely the one actor that's, shall we say, not committed. Unlike you, Jay, I have never been a particularly big Sean Young fan. I don't actually think she's ever really been that good, but she is exceptionally bad here. I mean, I'll be and again, yeah, part of it is, I mean, what a just a thankless, awful role that she's got.
At least Kelly McGillis had like a character.
Yeah. What a just a thankless. I mean, she does get the big hero moment of shooting down the plane and saying "snort that sucker," but even that is like, of all the like one-liners in this movie, it's not a good one, right?
Better yet, all the people to make the cocaine joke, that's who you give it to.
Yeah, and so I just she's. So I've gotten over it. As I've watched this movie so much over the last 30 years, I have gotten used to her performance in this, and it doesn't bother me like it used to. But I'm definitely, I mean, this is a paycheck movie for her, and it's obvious it's a paycheck movie for her.
On that side of things, Lindsey, I'm assuming you agree with me. Sean Young's not very good in this. Yeah. But on the other side of it, though, they do give her absolutely nothing to do except try to deadpan react to Nicolas Cage going like, you like it when I'm on top, and he's flying over the top of her in a damn helicopter and all this just random sexual harassment in the air. I'm like, look, I know enough about military frequency to know, like, you don't have that kind of conversation. One, you can't fucking hear yourself. And two, there's no way. Like, somebody would be going like, shut the fuck up. And bringing that guy down. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, no, I know that, like, it was a different time. And so the eye roll that maybe the listeners did not hear me do, but maybe you did, was not because of the whole, like, how crazy, blatantly like sexually harassing he was, because it was blatant. But he looked like a freaking axe murderer when he did it because his eyes are so big. Like if I were her, I would be hightailing it home, and so her reactions were just like, "Oh, you're so you," and it was like, what is wrong with you? Go home. Keep your gun next to your bed. Like, you need protection, lady. This guy's going to come in and murder you in your sleep. No one can convince me that anyone is like, there's no one creepier than Nicolas Cage at the club in this movie.
Okay, yeah, the club scene is that's pretty rough.
They even get this crazy shot of him, and the camera's like looking down and he's looking up, and the way he's looking up, like you can see like so much of the top of his eyeball. It really makes him look like a crazed lunatic.
It was very much something that I feel like, and I don't have any proof of this, I'm just guessing it, but I made a note to myself that like David Green likes the way Paul Verhoeven shoots dark lit scenes, because it felt very Verhoeven when they were trying to do the romantic parts of this movie. And in this, only the twisted way Verhoeven would shoot something like that.
That's the thing. I couldn't, because of the way she was reacting, I was like, I think this is supposed to be like a meet cute, get back together type of coy, flirty scene, but
they do know each other. Like we should say, like the characters have a history. So
but that is not the vibe I was getting.
Yeah, again, criticisms that I can't argue with. I mean, it's almost one of those movies, you know. And I'll be honest with y'all. This hit bad, and even in 1990, right?
Yeah.
Like even in 1990, it was.
Yeah, we all felt weird about this. Yeah.
Jake, you need to back the fuck off. But yeah, I mean, I like the scene when he's like, "Why is it so hard for you to understand that I just don't want you to get her, dude? You're going into fucking combat. So is she. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
it's one of those movies where you almost do wish, you know. I almost feel like some of these military movies from this era would have just been better to just make it like a dude's rock kind of movie and just completely eliminate Sean Young's role, right? Because for me, what I gravitate to in this movie is the father-son, parent-teacher, or, you know, student-teacher relationship between Cage and Tommy Lee Jones. Those are the scenes, those are the interactions that I really enjoy in this movie. It's them talking, it's them bantering, it's them coming to this understanding of who they are and stuff like that. And then it's almost one of those where, anytime Sean Young shows up, and it's not her fault, it's the role's fault, I just roll my eyes because it makes Cage go from cocky to creepy. She's terrible in it. You know, the only line that she has that I think actually works is when he fails the box and they discover right before she figures out he's got an eye dominance problem. She says, it's like sex. Hardly anybody gets it right the first time. That's actually a good line. And she actually kind of delivers that, but there's so much other stuff in here for her. And then for them to sort of weirdly damsel in distress her, but then not, because like, I don't want to jump, you know, too far ahead, but it's like, you know, she's got that line when Stoller's chasing her and she's like, come on, Jake, save my ass. And I mean, I remember in 1990, even just rolling my eyes at that one. Right.
Yeah.
But then they like try and make it up by her shooting a missile up a plane's ass. I don't know.
Right.
I feel like I would happily sacrifice her role in this to get more scenes with Nick and Tommy Lee Jones, because she's so underserved by this role that it's like, let's not just token throw a woman in this movie because Top Gun had Kelly McGillis, right? Yeah. Like let's just skip it and just make a dude's rock movie and just let the dudes be the dudes and blow shit up.
Well, you know why Invasion USA is awesome? Because the female reporter they let tag along with Chuck Norris for 5 minutes. At no time is there any romantic chemistry with him. They don't try to play that's up. And after he shoots somebody in the head and saves her, she's out of the movie and he's off to go kill Rostov. Because that's what makes that movie work. Is that they don't try to ham fist this relationship drama shit in the middle of this military action movie.
Well, and being a cishet white dude, I don't want it to sound like I'm trying to say, we need fewer female roles in movies. That's not it at all.
True.
But a one this shitty doesn't do anybody any good, right? Like that doesn't help anybody involved. If this is the best you can do, just don't even do it. Does that make sense, or am I like treading into some really terrible stuff?
I 150% agree with you. And one of my pet peeves, especially in action movies and sci-fi specifically, and books, is a love story that is forced in for no reason that does not move the plot forward and has no business being in there. And there are way too many books and films that try to do this. And it's like, not everyone needs a love story in their entertainment. Please just get this out. This is like a fighter, helicopter, military, blow shit up movie. Just leave it there. That's fine. I'd be fine with that.
I would have even liked it better if just to rewrite the movie for a minute to put on my Nick hat here, because he's famous for doing that on the show, is like you can have that same character. They have history, but instead of being creepy and weird in the laundromat, he's like, hey, I'm glad to see you're doing good. Glad you got your wings. Good to be working with you. And they're like compadres. They have respect for each other. They don't do this chase each other around the living room shit.
Or have a gross sex scene.
Yeah,
And that's the other problem with this movie, right? Is it's just classy enough to not go full exploitation, because it would also be one thing if this was just a full exploitation movie, right? And we're like, we got this female character because we need some titties. You know, we got international investors. We got to get some titties in this movie. But it's just classy enough that they don't go that far, and so it's stuck in this weird limbo where we just have this actress who, even though she's not one of my favorites, I know she's a hell of a lot better than this role and a hell of a lot better than this performance. And it's absolutely, as much as I defend this movie, it is absolutely, I think, the one part of the movie that if somebody was like, yeah, I can't do the whole Sean Young, like that just knocked me out of the movie, I would be like, cool, I got no problem with that. You get knocked out because you don't like helicopters blowing shit up. You and I, we are not going to see eye to eye on that. But you don't like Sean Young's role in that arc. I got no problem with that. It's terrible. It's absolutely fucking terrible.
Yeah, she's given nothing to do, and consequently, she does nothing with it. So, except to the very end, when she takes the most ridiculous set of instructions. Well, all these things exist, by the way. The whole receiver coffee can, you can hook it on a stinger. That's how that equipment works. They just don't carry it in the helicopter because when they go down, the last thing they're thinking about is, oh, let me pull one of those off the side and shoot that jet that's somehow only armed with guns. Which is another hilarious part of this. It's like, yes, the cartel can only afford machine gun bullets, but not missiles for their two screamer jets here. But who cares? Because there is something sort of, you have to suspend disbelief of a helicopter versus a jet. Because my understanding of avionics is that is not a fair fight. And unless the helicopter literally snuck up out of nowhere and shot the thing, there's no way that would ever go down the way that they depicted this movie. And especially when Tommy Lee Jones and his guy, the Rice Man or whatever, like the way that they shoot that jet down. No, I mean, he blows it a kiss when he shoots it too. I'm like, come on, dog. Like, I mean, I get it, but like, come on, bro. That ain't how that works. But we got to talk about Stoller as the villain here, though, y'all, because this dude, I don't know who Burt Ryan is. My understanding, this is his only credit as an actor, but I got a lot of Blue Thunder, Malcolm McDowell, Connell Cochran shit off of him, and I was here for it. I needed him to have more lines. Every time they put him on the screen and they showed him not only in helicopter action, like close-ups where he's up in the air, they're showing stills of it, but they've got him like holding an Uzi to somebody's face. He's throwing a cigar at somebody. I'm like, man, they just created like the chief asshole mercenary of all time. But they didn't even give him a bad Euro trash accent. That's what I was disappointed of. I wanted to hear him talk.
Yeah, but he does cut a pretty impressive physical, like you said. And he looks good with the sunglasses on his helmet and stuff. He makes a good villain for this movie, because we ultimately don't actually. I mean, he's better than, honestly, not to like compare this to Top Gun again, but he's actually better than what we get at the end of Top Gun, because we don't know anything about those MiG pilots. At least Stoller, we sort of have a sense of who he is. And again, in our very efficient opening, he shot down Jake's team, so we do have a little bit of investment there, so that when we get, oops, you blew it, we can actually like fist pump, or if you're like me, you can fist pump.
I mean, he has a presence. You're right. And you're right with the face and his beard and all that kind of stuff. It's actually pretty good. And I'm sitting here, people, this podcast is a visual medium. All of a sudden, people aren't sitting here. I'm thinking like, if Mike, we could just get the helmet on you, man. You've got the beard to pull off Stoller. You could be a hell of a trivia question at a Halloween party. So.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I could pull that off. That's true. But then, two people in the world, namely the two of you, will get it. So
true. I will talk you, as your presence on this podcast as a guest has shown, I will talk you into some bad ideas. But no,
everyone's officially invited to the Film Strip Podcast Halloween party coming at you.
I think that needs to happen.
October 2022.
We need to make that happen, Lindsay. I do like the way that the big battle goes down, though, and I love Tommy Lee Jones's whole like meta commentary over everything that's happening to him. Like, he seems so calm. Like, we're about to get shot. Just get ready for it. Like he knows everything's coming. Like he's been there before. And I'm like, man, this is actually kind of fun. Like I was digging the action scene. When we got to the last 20 minutes of this movie, man, I was in full adrenaline mode. I was happy for that.
Because we get that conversation with them the morning of, and you get, that's going to get a call back, but where Tommy Lee Jones is telling Nick Cage, that he's expecting him to be a genuine goddamn American hero. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, shit just starts blowing up. And I love that. That's that efficiency that I love. It's like, we don't know, like, how did the cartel find it? It doesn't matter. They found them. They just start blowing shit up, and everybody runs and takes off. And then, at the end, you get the call back where he's like, you look like a genuine goddamn American hero. But I mean, I think the last 20 minutes of this is, as an action fan, it's pretty terrific stuff. It's exciting. It's well shot. And I think, again, that's part of why I have such affinity for this movie, is the stuff that's in it that's good is really fucking good. There's just some really bad stuff in it, and I fully acknowledge that.
But I do love that the final go apart with Stoller and Jake and Breaker. Breaker gets shot in the leg, so he can't shoot anymore for whatever reason. Fine, we know Jake's got to pull the trigger. Like, that's got to be part of it. So we're just going to confuse who does what in the helicopter still. But I do have to laugh that they did pull the Top Gun. And that's like a thing in every aviation pilot movie since Top Gun. They even did it in fucking Independence Day and Independence Day Resurrection. Hit the brakes and they'll fly right by, which is a real move, but it doesn't always work that well. I love that he does it, but I have to ask, do y'all feel like there was a big cut or two scenes smashed together when he goes from "you blew it" to "I'm gonna kill him now"? Like, it's like total 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds before he fires all that shit through the back of Stoller.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I do. I guess I
mean, because you blew it was great. If he just pulled the trigger there, that'd have been hilarious. It's just when he goes insane that I was like, oh, where'd that come from?
Just 0 to 100, or idling at 75 to 100. I don't know.
True.
But yeah, I mean, it was all within the action sequence. So, which is just a disorienting kind of experience for the viewer in general. I mean, not in a bad way. That's just how it works. Things are blowing up and you don't know who's shooting what in the helicopter. They made that pretty ambiguous from the start. And so I didn't honestly really think much of it. I was just like, all right, well, that's happening now. So we're good.
I do love how they absolutely kill that guy so dead. They have to show us him getting shot up in the seat before he's incinerated into a billion pieces. I'm like, oh, they wanted him real dead. Like
that, you know what that actually reeks of to me, the whole "you blew it and I'm going to kill him now" is test screenings that they were probably two different takes, and they probably and this is just pure speculation, but they probably tested both and felt like we need both. Like each one by itself isn't quite enough of a pop, and so we need a little bit more. It has always struck me as, I guess, a little bit weird, but like you said, Linz, I never really noticed it because so much of that final scene in a good way is disorienting, you know, because you're cutting between the outside shots of the helicopters and then the inside shots of the cockpits, and trying to mask your budget by kind of obfuscating who's shooting who and who's flying around who and stuff like that. You know, I'm relatively certain that they probably only had those planes, if they even had those fighter jets. I didn't look it up. It's entirely possible that the plane footage is like stock footage. I mean, to be honest with you, but I'm betting at best they had them for like a day to get maybe like 10 minutes of coverage. And so they have to cut those back and forth a lot. You know, but again, that's where the art of editing comes in. And again, like I said, I think it works pretty great, even though it's a bit disorienting. But I mean, I do think the two kiss off lines feels a little weird.
One thing I'll give this movie a ton of credit for is, unlike Top Gun, where it's the same two missile shots over and over that they got from the Navy, they just keep reversing the angle. Like they got 4 or 5 really good sets of the Army helicopters, like letting go of their ammo for them, and they used them real judiciously. Like there's a lot of insert shots of the close up of the machine gun and shit, but when they're firing all the the rocket pods and stuff, that looks pretty cool. And credit to the National Guard for going like, let's blow some ammo, and letting them get that on film, because it didn't look recycled at any time. I was pretty impressed with it.
So that was actually the National Guard.
They had National Guard helicopter pilots and doing a lot of the flying for them, and then they fired off their ammo for them a couple times so they could get it on film. So
cool.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that, though, because just that kind of little detail in a movie like this, because again, it could have just been like, whatever, we'll just use the same shot over and over. We're like, no, let's actually like show some of the different shit this thing can do, and I'm sure someone from the Army said, please don't show them that thing that it can do, because we don't want people to know that, at this point in time. But hey, that's fine. I mean, I got a kick out of that. Again, appealing to the 13-year-old me that saw it when I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, that was cool, because that's what the video game looked like, at least in my head. It didn't look like that at all, but it's what I wanted it to look like. Now it would look like that on, my phone probably. But
when you think of this movie in the context of a video game, it makes a lot more sense.
I'll save that for my summary or whatever. What I think this movie is a mashup of the two things I think it really mashes up, and neither are Top Gun or Iron Eagle, but we'll get to that as we get to it. We do have to end on the cute line though. Who's driving? No, I'm driving. Neither of you are driving. Dale needed to come on the thing on neither of you are driving ever again. In fact, we're going to talk about counseling children because you need to work out your issues. I appreciate what you've done for our country and our task force, but you two need to either get a room or stop talking to each other. So it's something there. Yeah. Don't put the Phil Collins drop on.
I did read the Wikipedia summary that you mentioned to me. Holy shit. That was clearly written by one of the screenwriters on this, right? There is no way that is written by like somebody that reads like it doesn't even read like a Tom Clancy movie. It reads like a technical manual or something. Like there's way more time talking about the helicopters used than anything in the actual movie. Using an unconventional but effective training method little helps Preston deal with his eye dominance disability.
Yeah,
really? Right. You write a synopsis and you're like, you forget to say that he puts red fucking panties on his head. Come on.
No, that's why I'm saying, I'm like, whoever wrote that was seeing a different film than what's actually
it's
there.
It's not even that they were seeing it different. It's fucking David Green sitting there at home being like, this is my masterpiece. So I've got he's British. So this is my masterpiece. So I'm going to put it in there. When like no
That's
mention
awesome.
of I Am the Greatest, no mention of shoot 'em, cook 'em, boil 'em, bake 'em, all gone bye-bye. Sorry, I'm done now. I'm ranting.
No, I'm with you.
Actually,
That's the best stuff, though. When Cage is doing that stuff, that's the hilarious part.
you should go on Wikipedia and edit it.
See, right?
No, I'm not going to do that. I should, but I'm not going to.
Well, guys, I think we're at the part of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Firebirds? Lindsay, let's start with you.
Wow. What can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said? You know what? I do. After talking to you guys, I see the appeal. I get it. I will say that from just a purely nostalgic standpoint, I do like seeing older action films and how they were made from that standpoint versus CGI. I like that bit. I still can't get past the terrible acting. I know, Mike, you don't agree with me. I can't do it. I will give it a small popcorn. Maybe it needs a second watch. I don't think I'm the person to watch it a second time, but if you didn't like it the first time, maybe go back out there, put yourself back out there and watch it a second time, because clearly there are people who really, really enjoy it. But as for me, I think I'll move on to the next film in my list. I'm going to give this a small popcorn.
All right, Mike.
So this popcorn is agile, mobile, and hostile. I have to give this a large popcorn. I understand all of the criticisms and everything. Other than the acting, Lindsay, you have said nothing that I disagree with. But this movie means, and this is one of those where, I'll put my credibility out there. For me, this is a large popcorn with cheese and all the butter I can possibly put on it. And I'm going to stuff my face and try and have a heart attack by the time I'm done, because if I go out, I want to go out watching Firebirds. So, yeah.
Yeah. You live your best life, honestly. You do that. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Seriously, do it.
And I knew you were a fan of this. I had no idea you were the mega fan you are of it, Mike. So I really appreciate you coming on and being that, because I'm going to split the difference here on this one. This is medium popcorn territory, but not in the way I use medium. Sometimes I kind of like damn a movie for not living up to what it could be. This movie is way more than it could be. Like, it's doing everything it can do, and it's flunking some of it, but it's getting enough of the class by that I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt on that final paper, because you ended it right. Like, it feels to me the way I think about a lot of the music of the era that I love and listen to. Like, if you go back and listen to Open Up and Say Ah from Poison, there's some awesome songs in there. There's also some real garbage in the middle of that album too, but it starts well and it ends well. And
it's the film version of Nothing But a Good Time. There's our analogy. It is the film version of Nothing But a Good Time.
I can get behind that.
It's also two other 80s films mixed together that I haven't completely dropped here. This is Blue Thunder meets The Last Starfighter in an Army helicopter. And if you will go watch those two movies and then watch this again, you'll see what I mean, because it is exactly so many of the same beats, so many of the same ideas. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. If you're going to borrow from stuff, borrow from cool shit like that. And I'm all about some of that. All of Tommy Lee Jones' crankiness is all up in Roy Scheider's life, because that was the life he was living at the moment. And that's kind of who he always was, which I love about him. And you've got all the cockiness of Lance Guest in the nuclear embodiment that is 26-year-old Nicolas Cage. It makes it infinitely fun. I'm not going to lie to y'all. When I rewatched this time, anytime they were trying to get to the tender moments, your boy hit mute or hit fast forward because I didn't need it. I knew it didn't matter, didn't care. Like, get me back up in the air. Let's get back in the bag. Let's do some simulator. I can watch Sean Young do cooler stuff elsewhere because this is not her performance, as we've said. So I'm going to give it a medium popcorn, but it's like the perfect matinee medium, perfect amount of butter, just the right tinge of salt. This is when I've had my long run for the week, and I'm going to cheat and enjoy this, eating that up. So I'm with you on the medium popcorn, drowned in the butter, and no regrets at all for watching this. And I'm so glad that we got a chance to redo this one because, like I said, it had been years. I mean, over probably 15 years since I watched this movie, and I'm so glad to get it on with somebody who looked at it totally fresh and had a different experience with it, and then like the super fan of it, who I had no idea you own this 4 different ways. But man, like I
was
this.
Not kidding when I told you I am literally the world's biggest Firebirds fan. I mean, even David Green's like, that guy in Utah is weird. I don't know why David Green's all of a sudden Australian, but nonetheless, I don't do accents. Sorry. But yeah, no. And yes, Linz, at some point I will have to come on and with you and actually talk about a good movie, because I've done good movies with Jay before.
Yes,
but
but unfortunately, Liz has not been. Well, we will find one the next time I bring the trio together here. We will find something legitimately
we
good.
have done good movies.
Yes, we have. Liz and I have reviewed good movies together before.
Blues Brothers.
Yes, American Werewolf in London. So
the problem is I like garbage, and so most of the time when Jay reaches out to me and he's like, "Do you want to talk about X, Y, or Z?" If he gives me a choice, the most garbage movie is the one that I'm going to talk about. Because...
Do you know what though? I like garbage too. I fully support your fandom of this movie because I get it from a garbage loving person myself.
I'll give you one last metaphor of what this movie is. This movie is the Ultimate Warrior's wrestling career in the 80s. Every minute of that.
You're pulling Ultimate Warrior out?
I love the Ultimate Warrior. I'm a mark for the 80s version of the Ultimate Warrior up to when he beat Hogan for the title.
The pre-racist Ultimate Warrior.
Leaving the person aside just before they let him really talk. But when he was just over in the side going, "From the heavens, I will throw you, Hogan, into the sea of tranquility," or what the hell ever, all that stuff. I'm there for that because that's what this movie is. It's just Nicolas Cage being the Ultimate Warrior, cutting promos. Tommy Lee Jones over there doing his thing. That's the other metaphor I have for this movie. So I think it lives in that sphere, and moreover, it's a ton of fun talking about it with you two, and always is. And Mike, once again, thanks for coming on the show. Tell folks again how they can follow you and all the cool stuff you got going on.
Yeah, so you can follow me personally on Twitter and Letterboxd at Hibachi Justice. If you follow me right now, you'll see that my handle is Jake Preston Superpilot, just in case anybody's wondering if I'm sincere. You can follow Action for Everyone on Twitter at A4E Podcast. That's the letter A, the number 4, the letter E Podcast. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts can be found. We're pretty much everywhere. Like I said, we do generally record every Sunday, and I do a next to no editing and just turn those around quick. So just be on the lookout for those every Sunday.
Y'all are my I'm not making this up. Y'all are my Sunday evening or Monday morning run podcast. Like, I save it for that time. So I enjoy it and heartily endorse all of that stuff. So once again, Mike, thanks for being a part of the show. Lynn's always great to have you on the show as well. And you've got all kinds of cool stuff going on, and we will do something good next. I promise. we will do something good. So
even if we don't, it'll be great.
It always is. It's always podcast gold here at Filmstrip. Folks, you can follow the show's social media at FilmstripPod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. There you'll find announcements about upcoming shows. If you're following on the Twitter, you're mostly getting the thoughts of Ron, which are absolutely hilarious, and we highly recommend you do that. If you're getting the gram and the book, you're usually seeing the stuff Lindsey and I put up. But you'll find links to upcoming shows, a link to our Letterboxd page, which has our entire list of reviews, 330 plus movie reviews. I guarantee you we got stuff in there for you, no matter what you like. Go to filmstrippodcast.com. That'll link you to our Anchor.fm distribution site, where you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, all the places where you can find a show. Please share the show if you can. Leave us a positive review on your podcast platform, as it helps other people find the show. For Lindsey and Mike, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Filmstrip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Filmstrip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.